Hello there, you Awakening Wonders. Thanks for joining me today for Stay Free with Russell Brand. We've got a fantastic guest for you today. It's Dr. Michael Nehls, who's written this extraordinary book, The Indoctrinated Brain, which will help us to understand how propaganda, neurology, nutrition, and toxicity all intersect to create a mental environment where we become more malleable. In our item, Here's the News, we'll be talking about decentralization, Donald Trump, and abortion. Is decentralization the solution to polarization? Are we going to be able to create a better, fairer, more representative world if we decentralize power? And let's use the hot button topic abortion to analyze that after, I don't know if you saw on Bill Maher's show when he mentioned abortion and murder. Hey, it's a contentious subject and we'll be looking at it a little later. For the first 15 minutes, we will be on YouTube. Then we will be exclusively available in that sweet stream of freedom that we call Rumble, and we would love you to join us there. Perhaps you should consider becoming an Awakened Wonder, where you get additional content every single week, an exclusive video this week on There's Something in the Water. And this is actually quite germane to Dr. Nehls' stuff. Are there toxic agents that can create particular states, like fluoride? I don't know if you saw Rogan and Tucker discussing it. That's this week's exclusive video that you get if you become an Awakened Wonder. For a couple more days, you can use the code ISURRENDER and you will get 1 month free. That's how much we believe in it, and you'll be able to join us for fantastic conversations as well. Now, Dr. Michael Nehls is a physician and molecular geneticist. He's a molecular geneticist. That's what he basically is. He's deciphered the genetic causes of various hereditary diseases at German and international research institutions. I've told you about his book, The Indoctrinated Brain. We'll post a link in the description for that now. We spoke about a variety of subjects. Are we in danger of creating a zombie society? And what was the true impact of the spike protein? Remember, this is the kind of content that we do live, and many of the questions that I ask were posted by members of our Awakened Wonder community. Become an Awakened Wonder. Here's my conversation with Dr. Nehls now. Hope you enjoy it. Dr. Nehls, thank you so much for joining us today.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Brand or Russell, if I may.
You are very welcome to call me either of those things. Your book, The Indoctrinated Brain, has caused quite a stir. I understand in your native Germany you have had a lot of online success because you have explained some complex ideas that might usually be left in the realm of conjecture or even conspiracy, were it not for the empiricism that backs much of your work. Can you tell me primarily, Doctor, why you believe there is a silent war against our brains, which is a terrifying idea, and how that relates to events from at least 2019, but by your reckoning predates that by some significant margin?
Yeah, I mean, for decades, people live not according to our people's necessities, natural necessities, and the consequences are seen everywhere in the body. I mean, we see the civilizatory diseases coming up in high numbers, but most prominently, we see a rise in depression and Alzheimer's. And depression and Alzheimer's are hallmarks of a particular part of our brain that is damaged based on our lifestyle, and that is what we call the hippocampus, based on its structure. It's a seahorse-like structure. We have two of them in our temporal lobes, and this seahorse is our autobiographical memory center, which gets destroyed. We see the result in Alzheimer's, but already depression is part of it. And what I've found out and published in 2016 was a paper, Unified Theory of Alzheimer's Disease, where I showed that the production of new nerve cells in the hippocampus is required to prevent Alzheimer's, but also to stay curious all your life, to have a high resilience, psychological resilience. And what I've recently shown is that you need this production of new nerve cells to be able to think at all.
Well, sometimes thinking's part of the problem in my experience, but what is it that impedes the production of the neurocells in the hippocampus, Doctor?
Yeah, most simplistically, growing new cells means like growing anything. If you grow roots on the field. Already in 1828, researchers found out, it's called the law of the minimum, that if something is missing, the growth doesn't occur. So if you have a lack of something, then you have a problem. So most of the problems that we had in the last decades is a missing of micronutrients, for example, certain micronutrients, but also there's a law of the maximum. Certain toxins don't go well for your brain, particularly the part of the brain that is so susceptible to damage, and that is the newborn cells that we require to be able to think. So there's always a damaging process going on, and that led to the highest rate of depression we've ever seen in the history of humankind in 2018, 2019. And as I already alluded to in a previous book, this is essentially the reason that people accepted everything that happened in 2020. But it even got worse, because what they accepted was a lifestyle that is so far away from normal, even further away from what is natural, that the damage was even aggravated. So we had an increase of depression by a factor of 3 in the United States. There was a publication out there, a factor of 3 in just 6 months going into 2020. And we had a really huge increase of Alzheimer's now at the end of 2021 in Germany that was documented and clearly showing that there is a severe damage going on in our hippocampal neurogenesis. And as I show in my book, every function that is based on the production of these nerve cells together is essentially what I call our mental immune system. So what we see actually is a breakdown of the individual and the individual immune system, mental immune system, and that, of course, if it happens to many people, the immune system of society.
So preceding 2019 and the pandemic and its social measures, and indeed medical and pharmaceutical measures, you are saying presumably as a result of environmental factors that induce toxins, presumably because of diet and pre-existing pharmacological medical interventions, we were already in this primed state where the generation of necessary neurological cells had been inhibited either due to an excess toxicity or prohibition or at least limitation of necessary nutrients or other components required. So are you saying that this is just a kind of inert process that's happening as a result of big food? Are you saying that this is a deliberate process that's being orchestrated? And did it significantly alter during the pandemic period? I recognize that you're saying that depression, for example, increased. It's certainly clear that a lot of diseases curiously increased and excess deaths increased. But what are you saying is what are the factors that could be prevented that are leading to these conditions, and how are they brought about, and who benefits from them, and is it deliberate?
Well, the question of deliberity is difficult to answer because nobody says, okay, that's what I did. But if you look at the circumstantial evidence, it becomes quite convincing. For example, we know that people, even if they eat well, they don't have, for example, not enough vitamin D in their blood. Vitamin D is a very severe problem in most of society. It inhibits the production of new nerve cells in the hippocampus, but also inhibits not only the mental immune system in that case, but also our physical immune system. And that was actually the major reason I started to think about it in the way I brought it about in my book, is because we knew already in summer 2020 that all the deaths that we've seen, the real deaths of respiratory disease, not the one which are just PCR positive and maybe they died of a heart attack, but the people who really suffered from a respiratory disease, we knew already in 2020 that it is caused by what we call a cytokine storm, an overreaction of the immune system based on the virus. But the cause of the cytokine storm is a lack of the regulatory hormone vitamin D. So that was totally clear. It was shown with as much proof as humanly conceivable possible. I mean, this was so clear that it was, for me, inconceivable why the medical societies in the world didn't push people taking vitamin D in sufficient quantities to save lives in the upcoming pandemic or next wave in the end of 2020. It was totally clear. We see the reduction of vitamin D in the wintertime, and that's the reason for the seasonality of respiratory diseases, not only COVID, but any of them. All kinds of viruses have a field day when the vitamin D is down. So it was totally clear this is happening not by accident. There's a propaganda, actually, very severe propaganda against vitamin D. For example, Medscape, one of the leading portals for information or for healthcare professionals, published in many languages by the pharmaceutical industry. They tell us we shouldn't take any vitamin D. Vitamin D is not necessary. Actually, one professor in Germany said recently that the Nazis started giving people vitamins. And so if you want a vitamin D and ask your doctor for vitamin D, you are essentially a right-wing extremist. You're actually following Nazi ideology. And this was in Medscape. And for example, the New England Journal of Medicine just published in 2022 that even if you have a deficiency in vitamin D, you don't need to take any to prolong life. And actually, healthcare professionals should stop recommending vitamin D, measuring vitamin D, or supporting the intake of vitamin D. So that's the situation where I realized there's something awfully going wrong. There's an evil force behind that, trying to tell us that we shouldn't take vitamin D. But the consequence of that is, of course, if there's a lack of vitamin D in the society, then people actually die from the cytokine storm. And then I asked myself, why do they want people to die from the cytokine storm? Why do they want really to have people dying from COVID? Well, you can push the numbers up with PCR, but at the end of the day, you need somebody actually being killed, where a pathologist says, yeah, that's really COVID. That was really a respiratory disease. But of course, this can only happen if you tell people don't take vitamin D. There was a publication in 2022, for example, that in 2021, actually, that showed that it's a meta study where they looked at all the studies that have been out there at the time, and they made a calculation that at 125 nanomole per liter vitamin D, the likelihood of dying of COVID is zero. And that's actually the level of vitamin D you find in people living in the outside in Africa, for example. When you make measures there, you have exactly this natural level of vitamin D, around 120 nanomole per liter. And at that level, the likelihood of dying of COVID is zero. The German Cancer Research Center published in November 2020, that's 2020, before this whole mRNA experimental gene therapy program started. They published 9 of 10 deaths of COVID, real COVID, could be prevented by just raising the level of vitamin D in the society. And this was all out there. The whole proof was out there, but no healthcare professional, and at least not the majority, cared about that. And from the official side, we were told there's no alternative to the mRNA.
Now, we're stopping the interview at this exact point before you hear the answer to that exquisite and interesting question. To see the rest of the conversation, you have to click the link in the description, come over to Rumble, and remember, consider becoming an awakened wonder. That way, you will be part of a movement that cares about you and part of an awakening that, Lord alone, I believe the world needs sincerely. Thank you for joining us. Click the link, join us. See you later.